talking to Maria about her very challenging job in the prison system. The backbone of my campaign is people whose work really matters, and on the spectrum of career fields, on the spectrum of income levels, there is a real united force for good happening at least in this district, if not in our state or the land, and I'm feeling it every single day, and I'm so inspired by it. I don't know, have any of you seen the new Michael Moore movie, Fahrenheit 11/9? James and I saw it last night, and it's devastating. There's not a whole lot new there, but it's about the state of the world and all the things that have gone wrong and all the things that need to be done. You know, it's about the Parkland shootings, and it's kind of devastating and a very important movie. Take it with a grain of salt, because I think Michael Moore can be a little over the top, but it's a great movie. And as we were walking out, I was, fighting back tears of rage and despair about so many things that have gone wrong of late. And suddenly I was surrounded by a group of people who happened, as it turned out, to be supporters of mine. They just happened to be watching the movie as well. And there were 3 or 4 of them. And they just said, don't worry, we have this. We have your back. We have each other's back. We're going to get through this terribly dark time. So people like you make me believe that. And that's why I'm running. The quick bio is, James and I live right around the corner on East Liberty Street. We have 4 adult sons, one of whom still lives with us, and who went through Valley Regional. And the other guys grew up in Hartford, where we moved down here from, thinking that we would be retiring. And then I decided to do this crazy thing to run for office, and now my poor husband has come out of retirement to support me again. And he's a wonderful graphic designer, so those beautiful yellow signs, you have him to thank for those, among other things. I have been a newspaper reporter for 10 years. I was a high school teacher for 10 years. I seem to do everything in 10-year spurts. A communications director, a small business owner. James and I and 40 of our friends in Hartford bought an old bowling alley together, which we rehabbed and turned into a neighborhood project. So I've owned small businesses, and then for the last 10 years I worked for the legislature as a non-partisan employee, meaning I worked on both sides of the aisle doing policy, research, and advocacy, specifically on the issues of women, children, and seniors. So my job was to advise legislators on the consequences of their votes, both intended and unintended. So if there was a bill that came up, it was my job to say, if you vote yay, 10,000 children are going to lose their SNAP benefits. If you vote, no, this and that happens. So, and we came at it, admittedly, from an advocacy standpoint, but in a nonpartisan way. So that was sometimes a fine line to straddle. I will say there were a couple of Republicans who were wonderful on a lot of issues I worked on. Human trafficking bills, for one. Nobody is in favor of human trafficking, I'm happy to say. At least I haven't met them. And there were some other bills like that were very much bipartisan. There are other issues where we seem to divide along party lines, and I will try very, very hard to bridge that gulf. Having worked up at the Capitol, I've seen how to do it, and I've seen how it fails. But I will tell you quite candidly that I won't compromise on what I believe and what I believe needs to happen. And when you see the sausage being made, as I did, you see a lot of great legislation go down in flames because people traded away one thing to get another. And I'm not so naive to say that will never ever happen, but one of the most wonderful things that I want you all to be aware of is that there are currently at least 50, whom I know personally, people running for state representative in our state who are progressive, smart. Many of them are very, very young. Many of them are my age. And we are, if even half of us get elected, we are going to change the face at the Capitol. We're going to change the face of the House of Representatives. Because normally what happens is people work and run in isolation, then they get elected, and then they face a sea of unknown faces, and it takes them years to get their footing and build coalitions and make friends. We're ready to go in there and start on day one with policy work that we're already talking about. And I want to include Norm Needleman, who's running for Senate in that, who's a wonderful thinker. So there is this new spirit of cooperation and ferocity. And the other day, I was working on my first mailer, and my husband changed a word. I had that I was a dedicated advocate, and he changed it to fierce. And I said, oh, that's kind of a scary word, you know, are we sure we want to? And he said, you know, you are fierce, you need to be fierce. These are times that demand that. So I'm getting comfortable thinking in that way. So I want to give you a very, very brief example of the kind of policy work that I want to do and that I did do. And I'll make this as unwonky as I can. On the statutes, human trafficking is illegal. It was a Class C felony to use the internet to buy a child, an underage minor, for the purposes of sexual exploitation. And there was a group of advocates outside the Capitol working with people on both sides of the aisle from within the Capitol, and they wanted to get it moved up to a Class B felony. And I said, why a B? Why don't we go for A? And they said, oh, public policy takes a long time. You'll never jump to, I don't know if any of you are in law enforcement or know about felony convictions and the tier system, but you know, you don't ever jump over a whole one and go up to. So I looked, what is currently a Class A felony in Connecticut? What do you have to do to be charged with a Class A felony? Murder is one, and I learned the aggregated sexual assault of a minor is a Class A. So aggravated means if you jump out of a bush in the dark and you grab a child and you sexually abuse that child, that's a Class A. But if you pay for the privilege through the internet, that's only a C. And I said to these guys, these legislators, I said, do you see how that sounds? How bad does it have to be to get it to be an A? Anyway, long story short, it's now a Class A felony. So that is the kind of work that I love doing. It can be small tweaks, and I'm hoping and I'm assuming that sexual predation and trafficking isn't affecting any of us here or people we love. But it does happen all around us, and those are the kinds of legislation that can make a huge difference in people's lives. There are also local issues I care a lot about. You know, Tylerville still doesn't really have great water in Haddam. The Connecticut River, how many of you grew up in Connecticut and remember when the river was dirty, filthy, you wouldn't let your dog drink out of it, right? It's the cleanest it's been in hundreds of years, literally hundreds of years. That is imperiled by what Trump's administration is doing and what they have done to the EPA. So what I hope to do is work with people who understand that the 10th Amendment gives states enormous power. What people don't realize about local elections, and I know I'm not running for mayor or select person, but I'm on the bottom tier of, here's the governor and here. And House races are considered local, 4 towns out of 169. But my vote, if I get elected, is going to be extraordinarily important because the 10th Amendment gives states the right to block federal legislation. It gives states all of the rights that the federal government doesn't have. So in other words, we can't impose tariffs, we in Connecticut. We can't wage war. We can't mint our own money. That's all federal. But we control our cops. We control our schools. We have enormous power that people don't realize, and that includes reproductive rights for women. It includes protecting our environment. It includes gun safety. And we can block a lot of this terrible stuff that is happening out of Washington. And so I will say to all of you, I am unabashedly progressive, and I intend to go in there and protect immigrants. And some people at the Capitol said to me, are you kidding? You're going to represent Essex. Nobody is at risk of being deported in Essex. Well, there are people who work in Essex who are literally terrified for their lives. James and I were door knocking there yesterday, and we talked to some people who are supporters. They're admittedly people of privilege. The woman who cleans their house is terrified for her life. And we actually talked about how they can protect her. What can they do to protect her? So I believe we are in this together. I believe we have to use really smart, surgical approach to changing legislation. Sometimes it can be a very small change, like going from a C to an A felony. And that's going to change thousands of people's lives. Those guys are going to go to jail now forever and not get out in 10 years. So that's what I want to do. That's what I believe I'm good at. And with your help, I can do that, and my colleagues. Teresa Govert is a young woman who lives right across the river. She's fantastic. I know all of you are in the 36th district, but we are surrounded by amazing new blood who are really determined to make a change, and I'm kind of like the den mother of them, you know, but they're pretty amazing. So that's kind of the arc, I think, of why I'm running and what I want you to know about me. I would love to hear from you, your concerns and your ideas, and before I relinquish the floor, because Sully is going to get mad at me if I forget to say this, we do still need help. We have an amazing number of volunteers, some of whom are here, and I know Dean and Lynn were early financial supporters. They helped me qualify for public funds. Jenny has gotten me dozens and dozens of signatures, you know, to qualify, and has door knocked. We have about 46 days left before the vote, and it is a numbers game. There are about 6,000 doors in this district that need to be knocked on, and we've done about 3,500, which is great. It's not bad at all, but every single day I have people like Cindy and Ken going out for me knocking on doors, and if any of you has any interest, I want to put it in perspective. Joe Courtney, whom I think we all know and I hope respect, won by 94 votes out of about 250,000. He represents the entire eastern part of the state, from Enfield all the way down. 94 votes. That was because of 2 women in Clinton who literally just relentlessly knocked on doors for him. And he'd be the first to tell you that. So when these races are won and lost by as few as 94 votes, that means every single door that people knock on counts. So my predecessor, whom I have a great deal of respect for, Phil Miller, he won Chester, Essex, and Deep River by about 300 to 400 votes, comfortable margin, but he lost the whole shebang because he lost by 1,000 votes in Haddam. So he lost the ultimate thing by just about 300 votes. And that's 2 people door knocking for 2 hours. That's what that means. I mean, that literally is what you can do. You can, in 2 hours, what do? Hit about 30 doors?
Yeah, a few streets.
So if you think, if I have, you know, if Cindy and people like her and Jenny, they go out a couple times a week, those numbers start to really add up. So if you had any spare time or energy, and if you don't like door knocking, you can drive me door knocking, you can stay in your car and I'll run up. You can make phone calls, and we're going to do a postcard writing. If any of you likes to do old-fashioned snail mail, we're going to do a postcard writing campaign where you literally write to your friends and say, I believe in this person. So there are lots of ways to help. If you don't, or are unable or unwilling to door knock, there's lots of other ways to help, and we really need it. It's a very dire time with a tremendously possible positive outcome.
So that the economic development brochure, you're gonna do that with us, and
Yeah, it's a
that's
mailer.
gonna go to everybody in the
Everybody in the district. Well, it's going to go to all Democrats and unaffiliated voters. Unaffiliated. Is anybody here an unaffiliated voter? Just out of curiosity. So they are the swing vote, and they are the secret to winning, because I know. Thank you, Dean. If I lose, their fault. It's the unaffiliated voters are proudly independent. My husband was an unaffiliated voter when I met him, but of course you can't vote in the primary. But they're very interesting to me because they're independents. I admire. They don't want to be labeled anything, and they split their ticket often. And there are many, many, many unaffiliated voters, so it will go to them as well as to Dems.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Having said that, I've had 5 Republicans tell me they're going to vote for me because they're so upset by what's happening. And so I try not to. I am a Democrat. I'm proudly Democratic, but it's an interesting time where we're getting people from all over the place wanting some change.
What are you hearing about Haddam and Higginham, like now, or what's your experience out there now? Because there's a lot of red there. There's it's mostly Republicans. So what are your experiences there? Because I haven't been out there.
It's challenging, and I don't expect to win in Haddam. I want to not lose by as much as my predecessor, and I want to win. Of course, I want to win. I just want to have that margin much more close. The Democrats who are there are so thrilled when we go in their door. They feel isolated, demoralized, and alone. I will be honest. They don't feel as though they're being listened to. And one of the things I would love us all to be better at is to include Haddam in our psychic thinking about Tri-Town. When our son Seamus went through Valley, you know, the kids said, I'm from Tri-Town, and they played against Haddam in sports. And the PTAs, you know, the parents of the children in our district don't socialize with the Haddam parents, and so they don't really feel a part of this district, and I think it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Having said that, there are some very wonderful, progressive, and very compassionate-minded people there, but it's tough. And then there was the whole incident of the woman taking the knee and the flag, and we've had some pretty ugly encounters at the door. My sign's been stolen in Haddam and tossed around. That hasn't happened here, hopefully it won't. But I'm one of the things that Sully is doing with me is we are trying to bridge that psychic gulf. I don't think it needs to exist. And the other thing that we're hearing is that Haddam is a little bit jealous, I guess is the best word. Our other 3 towns have these really wonderful cohesive centers. And Haddam is so bifurcated and spread out. It doesn't have a viable economic hub, and that's a thing I'd love to work on. They don't have the kind of historic preservation that we have here, so they're knocking down beautiful historic 19th century buildings. They don't have great restaurants. Some people are resentful that there's, like they say, there's no reason to go there. And I don't know quite how to break through that, but that's how they feel. Does anybody have any questions or concerns? I'd love to hear from you what you consider important, because I know I focused a lot on national things, and